background, I couldn't be more pleased to have him with me. And actually, I recently met Brock in, I believe it was September in Colorado
Hmm.
at an ACEC conference, which is the Association for Corporate Executive Coaches. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about Brock, and then I've got a lot of questions for him. But he's got a specialty in his coaching and consulting niche that I think is critical, and I think there's not enough of it. So I'm really pleased to have him join me today. Welcome, Brock.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Nancy.
Great, great. So, Brock is a certified master corporate executive coach. MCEC is the acronym, through the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches and the MECO Leadership Institute. So, he brings an enterprise wide effect to his customers. He has owned, and I love this, Integrity Consulting Services with his wife, Jeannie, since 1995. So kudos for the business and also for working with your wife for all of those years. That's fabulous. Not many of us could do that sort of thing with our partner. So
Well, she compliments me well.
yeah, I'm sure she does. I haven't met her yet, but I'm sure she does. But anyway, so Brock's coaching and consulting focuses all around values and integrity. And he's had a lot of impressive clients. He's worked in energy, transportation, technology, pharmaceutical, construction, and healthcare. And you are also, which I thought was kind of interesting, you're from, is it Red Deer, uh, Alberta, Canada? So
Yeah.
is Red Deer a small community of,
It's
or,
about 100,000 people. We're
oh,
just
okay.
an hour and a half north of Calgary, Alberta.
Oh, okay, great, great. So anyway, I'm just delighted to have him with me. Again, when I met him, I was intrigued. I loved hearing his stories about the work that he's doing with clients. And I'm not going to go into the full bio. I'll let Brock talk more about his business and his background. But again, welcome, Brock. I'm delighted to have you with us.
Thanks. So nice to be here.
Good, good. So tell us what drew you in, if you will, to executive coaching and leadership development all of those years ago.
Yeah, well, it really started with sort of leadership development. And I was a member of a senior leadership team in an energy company, an energy service company.
Okay.
And the parent company had done lots of acquisitions and was kind of struggling with who are we and sort of leading with a common sort of purpose and goal. So they brought in a consultant who was the executive vice president of a company called Holt Caterpillar, which you'll be familiar with out of San Antonio, Texas, Peter Holt's
Okay.
organization. And his name was Larry Mills. And Holt had sort of started a leadership consulting division, and Larry was sort of heading that up. So
Right.
that's so how he was able to split his role as an EVP and also doing work with us. And he started off by helping us establish vision, mission, and core values for the organization. And I think there was 24 of us who were senior leaders from all the various divisions. And I really was impressed by the impact Larry had on me, first
Okay.
of all.
Good.
And I remember looking at Larry and thinking, wow, there is a person of integrity. There's a guy I trust. And he eludes, trustworthiness. And I remember looking in the mirror and going, that's not quite who I am. But it's who I want to be.
Right.
But I didn't think I was there yet. And then I looked at the impact he had on our young CEO, who was just about the same age as I was, really moved up through the industry well, was well respected. But it had a significant impact on him. And I'll never forget him saying to me, Brock, I need you to hold me accountable to these values because I've spent most of my career violating them.
Oh, wow.
And, it was a really powerful connection for us in our relationship. And he has been
Sure.
a longtime friend, since that time. But we went through some really sort of ugly times of holding one another accountable and with some not very nice words,
Yeah.
spoken in the process. But the other thing that happened is we started to apply what Larry was teaching us because he also was taking us through sort of a leadership university,
Yes.
these various training and self leadership and team leadership. And it really started to have a significant impact on our division, on our EBITDA, on our safety performance in particular. It was huge.
Right.
And we functionally we went from being the worst performing division in the parent company to being the best performing division in the parent company. And, I look back in hindsight and go, that was actually one of the few teams that I belonged to that I felt was truly a high performing team. And it came out of sort of bonding around those values in particular.
Great. Great.
But so I eventually left that organization. I was offered a partnership to come in and run a service company, a private service company, and got involved in leading that. It was a safety services company, and became keenly aware of something, and that was an industry where nobody in industry trusted one another. The
Right.
landowners were involved, production companies were involved, government regulators were involved, service companies were involved, and nobody trusted anybody. And
Yeah.
I remember sitting at a meeting one day involving all those groups and
Right.
wondering what would it be like for trust to grow? What would it look like if trust in our industry grew, and how would
Right.
it impact us? But so I worked in that safety company leading it for a
Mhm.
number of years.
Um,
And I was driving home with my kids one day, and I said, scale of 1 to 10, what would you like your relationship with dad to be? And they gave me a 10, which was cool. And then I said, scale of 1 to 10, what is it now? And I got kind of a 4 to a 6,
Yeah.
which really sucked.
Yeah.
And I asked each of them that night, what would it take to move their score closer to a 10? My kids at the time were 8, 10, and 12.
Okay.
And I asked each of them separately, and they all said, more time, you're never here.
Okay.
And I just done an acquisition of a competitor in Dubai. We were a year and a half into a merger that we completed domestically as well, and I had to go to my partners and say, look, this isn't working because I'm going to be spending less time at home.
Right. Right.
And, so I left the partnership, which was very tough.
Sure.
And I remember thinking the impact that Larry had on me. And I'd read a book by Bob Buford called Halftime, which looks at, what do you want to do in the second half of your life? It was
Right.
timely. And I gave my friend Larry a call and said, Larry, will you teach me to do what you do? I said, I think I can impact trust in the energy industry if I can get people running on values. And he said, sure. So I spent about a year and a half going back and forth. And about 6, 7 months into that, and that was tough because I wasn't earning any money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wasn't
Exactly.
earning any money learning to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But anyways, about 6, 7 months into that, I got a call from a friend I know who was on the executive team of a company that'd gone through a lot of mergers and acquisitions, 15 or 16 of them.
Wow.
And he said, can you come speak to us about running a values-based culture? And I went and spoke to them and presented to 42 executives. And 2 weeks later, they called me and said, would you start working with us to help us define our culture and to build our leadership competency? And that was kind of my first client.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty exciting. And, I guess for me, too, there was a book that made a difference. I love the way that he talked about it, but it's similar to some of the things you're doing, was The Advantage by Patrick
Oh, yeah.
Lencioni.
Mm-hmm.
And what I loved is he said, you can't just have all these words, forget it. We can all do the word salad on values.
Yeah.
What are you behaving on, and are your values actionable? Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but anyway, so maybe you can also tell us a little bit more. So when you go in, if you're coming into our company, what can I expect, for my team? How do you help a company, I guess is my question. What's kind of the process, if you get a little more detailed as to what you're doing when you go inside?
Sure. So, not all cases, but in many cases, we've been pulled into organizations. And I think because we've had a high degree of success with it,
Right.
organizations that are floundering,
Yes.
are struggling with their identity, have gone through mergers and acquisitions, in some case, hostile takeovers.
There you go.
But predominantly, they've grown significantly, grown fast,
Oh,
grown by merger or acquisition. And it's like, who are we? And there's infighting over whose policies they follow. They don't trust one
right.
another.
Right.
They, in all probability, were competitors yesterday, and now they're one company today, and they've hated one another for the last 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we work together? So we start there, and we start by spending time with the executive team and really saying, how do you want to, what do you want your culture to look like? What does the ideal culture
Good.
look like? Where might you be now? And then we actually start an exercise where we say, let's take a look at your personal core values, each of you. Let's look at your personal core values. Let's help you define what they are. And some of them have them already. Most don't. They've never given it
Right.
really any thought.
Sure.
And then we say, if these are the personal core values of you as individuals, and we get, them sort of set up, then we take them through an exercise of saying, what are the personal values that you want to guide you and you want your employees to be guided by as you lead this company to success?
Right.
And that's the starting point. And then we do some work with the employees around understanding that or feedback on it. But key to it is a training program we have. It used to be called Ethics Awareness.
Okay.
And we start with the executive group. It's now called Values-Based Decision Making, but it really is about looking at the alignment between your personal values and the
Right.
corporate values. And then helping them understand what it looks like when those values are acted on, putting them into case scenarios where the values are stressed and tested. And we start off with personal case scenarios. And one of the ones we use is called My Friend, Your Friend Frank. And it's your best friends, your families are friends, your spouses are friends, your kids are friends, you
Right.
camp together. And then Frank gets fired because he was stealing from the company.
Oh my goodness.
And he asks you for a reference.
Ooh, that's a
Will
good
you will
scenario.
you give it? And without sort of giving the answer away, it really pulls on two values in particular. One is loyalty to Frank, and the other one is any value the individual might have around integrity or truthfulness or trustworthiness or ethics.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like, well, how can I align myself with both of those? It seems impossible to give a reference to my friend without lying,
Right.
you
Without
know,
omitting.
or omitting,
Yeah.
which is
And
still a
which is a
lie.
form of lying.
Yeah.
In that case, it's a form of lying. Right.
Yeah. So putting people into those scenarios where we really get them to pull on the values. And I'll never forget a case where a corporate executive was in on the course. He was the president of one of the divisions of the company. And we invited them to bring to the class an in-house ethical issue that they faced or are facing right now. And he brought it to his group, that he was learning with. He asked me if I could, and I said, "Sounds like a great one." And what it involved was, um, they had discovered after a project had closed, after the PO had closed,
Right.
that they had over invoiced the customer by $4 million. And he said the customer will never know it because we've in effect billed in accordance with the contract, but it was a cost plus job.
Right.
And their costs were reduced beyond what they originally thought. So they had a $4 million savings that should have been passed on to the client and wasn't.
Sure.
It wasn't malicious. It was
No.
just
No.
oversight. So he said, I brought this to my engineering team, and they all realized that if we give the $4 million back, they'll all not be eligible for bonus because it will take them away from their bonus,
Yeah.
criteria.
And or structure.
Um,
Right.
that's right. And so he said, this is a tough decision. And I said, well, run it through the 6-step process. We trained them in this decision-making process. And it was amazing. He said, some people at the table are going, what are the values saying? And some people at the table are going, screw the values. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, we need to make money
We need
because
that
the
money. I
organization,
want my bonus.
yeah,
Right.
and the organization wasn't hitting its profit margin. So tough decision. And we always say that, when you're living in integrity, it means you're willing to make the right choice, even though it's going to
Yes.
cost you more than you want to pay. Anyways, they ended up cutting a $4 million check to the customer, setting up a meeting, delivering that check to them, giving them the understanding and the financials as to why it worked,
Right.
and
Right. How
gave
that,
them the rationalization around their values and why it was values that led them to make the decision. Very difficult decision, contentious to say the least. But that's one of the cases, and
wow.
we've got a number of case studies from our customers where the client was so stunned by the integrity of the service provider that they signed non-compete contracts with them. And that's
Wow.
unheard of in the energy industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just doesn't happen.
Many years ago, we had a kind of reverse situation, just to give you, and we were shocked. So we're the vendor providing the services on
Mm-hmm.
360s and what have you, coaching. Anyway, and we bid on the contract, so we had a contract on what we were going to do, but then they kept adding to the work.
Mm.
And we didn't have a clause that said when you add work, we're adding fees.
Mhm.
So we kind of bid it. We lost a lot of money because we underbid because they kept expanding the scope too,
Mhm.
right? And so it was earlier. And they actually came back to us and we didn't say a thing because we thought that's shame on us, is what
Mhm.
we thought. We
Mhm.
messed up and we certainly can't go to them. Right. And this is
Mhm.
big financial institute, believe it or not. They came to us and said, we know you did a lot more than this contract.
Mhm.
Give us your hours because we want to pay you. So that's kind of that reverse.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one of my best business stories in a sense of, there's really good people out there. And if
Sure.
you have a good relationship and trust,
Mhm.
people do the right thing. So, but anyway, I kind of, when you mentioned that story, it reminded me of that. And we were kind of blown away when that happened to
Sure.
us.
Yeah,
And
that's a
especially
great
because
story.
it's easy to get vendorized, when you're on this side of it, when you're the supplier, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes, sometimes bigger companies, we may feel a little vulnerable at times. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and it's interesting. I don't. There's a debate in the consulting field, and some would say you don't ever need a value like integrity leading your company. You just hire people of integrity, and that becomes sort of table stakes. That's quite common, and I disagree with that for a number of
Yeah,
reasons. But one of them is, and I've surveyed tens of thousands of frontline people and executives, and I always ask them this question: do you receive more pressure to live by values or achieve the bottom line? And 100% of the time, the answer is to achieve the bottom line.
absolutely.
In great values based organizations, the pressure is pretty equal. Like
And
it's
that's
pretty,
great.
it's
Yeah.
pretty knowledgeable. I can't make money at the expense of our values, but getting there, people, that's not their experience. And it's
Right.
one of the issues they face when you start to become a values based organization. For many people, their history is make money no matter what. So they struggle with making that shift. They struggle with that level of accountability. And it's one of the things you have to overcome to help people overcome as you sort of redefine the culture.
And so I have a question because many years ago, working in energy industry as well, I had a situation where in public, if you will, or with a group of leaders, I was teaching a leadership with integrity workshop of all things,
Hmm.
coaching with it. Anyway, we had an executive who just came out and defied our leadership expectations and said,
Hmm.
this is a bunch of bull,
Hmm.
right? Right in the workshop. So, and I was all of 20 something years old or 30, I wasn't exactly. So it was pretty stunning and tough to deal with. So my question is, what do you do? Or have you had cases where executives and C-suite members don't support the values? And what happens in those cases when you have somebody like that? He was in energy trading, and the
Yeah,
energy traders, they're kind of mavericks to begin with. So
sure.
what do you advise companies and C-suites when you have a person or two that aren't coming along with you?
Sure. So we actually spend a lot of time trying to convince a company not to work with us upfront. And we do that by saying, look, if this is what you want, if you want to put these words on the wall,
Right, right,
whatever they end up being, understand that if you put them on the wall and fail to live by them, fail to drive them into the decision making of your organization, you'll be worse off today from a trust engagement perspective. You'll be worse off than you ever are today. And I take them through a number of scenarios.
good,
So one of the things I tell them we're going to do is we're going to train you and your team how to make values-based decisions in difficult scenarios.
good.
And then we're going to train you and your team to ask this question: how is that decision aligned with our core values? And the CEO has to acknowledge with the organization that that question, when asked, must always be answered.
Okay,
If
good,
your employee asks you that question, you have to answer it. If you ever go, screw the values, and
good,
so our
good.
CEO say this, then you and I are going to have an employment discussion, and
Right.
it can become a terminal event.
Yeah.
So, and I'll never forget. I had an HR lead come to me and say, we just had a disaster happen, and what had happened was one of the C suites was presenting to his 30-member team, um, doing some town hall stuff and discussion. And one of the front line accounting employees raised her hand and said, can you tell me how that decision is aligned with the core values? And it caught him off guard. It shouldn't have, but it did.
Yeah.
And he kind of stumbled and muffled his way through the answer, which wasn't a big deal because it was aligned.
Right.
She just couldn't see it, but it was aligned.
Okay, good.
But
Good.
he went to HR and said, you need to fire her.
Well, that's not a line.
And HR went like, what for? He said, because she questioned my character and she didn't know what to do. She came to me and she said, this is what happened. Like, I don't know how to handle it.
Right.
So I gave him a call and I said, help me understand what happened. He explained it to me. And I said, you think she challenged your character? He goes, yeah, she clearly thought what I was doing was unethical. I said, and I, maybe not the right words to use. I went, are you out of your frickin' mind?
Yes. Yeah.
What she did was demonstrate that she trusted you. No
Yeah.
frontline employee would ask that of a C-suite member unless she abundantly trusted you. And he went, oh. And I said, that has to be where it started. Like, if she asked, she trusted you, and now you want to fire
Yes.
her for trusting you.
Yeah.
And it was like a bell went off in his head. Oh, I
Good.
get it now. And she didn't get fired, by the way. But he learned a valuable lesson, and he had the courage to bring that lesson to the C-suite team.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. I mean, I just think too often, and even when we see the leadership ineffectiveness numbers that are rather dismal, I
Yeah.
think a big part of it is the integrity isn't there. Like you said, it's all bottom line. Let's get these
Mhm.
things done, not acting with integrity or consistency and just
Mhm.
kind of shooting from the hip. And so I think what you're doing is just so important. And we've run into now and then, clients who wanted us to do things and we've had to walk away and we say, no, we don't do that.
Mhm.
Confidentiality is confidentiality. We're not sharing results
Yeah.
or whatever it is. So, have you ever had that situation where you've had to, well, you say you do a good job. It sounds like you do a really good job vetting. Are you really ready to work with me kind of thing? Have you ever had some that said, no, we're not quite ready for you, Brock?
Yeah. In fact, when I first started, I probably spoke to about 2 or 3 customers, and I walked away from them.
Good.
We
Okay.
didn't sign a contract, but it was like, there's no way that the CEO or the executive have enough humility and courage
Okay.
to change their culture. Like, there's just no humility involved, and it takes a lot of humility for someone to say, like, tell me how that's aligned with the core values. It takes a lot of humility to answer that question.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's like, it just doesn't exist. And then we ran into a case where, one of our first customers, um, the end to the customer, we learned from this. We always want our end to be the CEO, or the senior leader. In this case, it was a member of the C-suite.
Okay, good.
And so I didn't have great access to the CEO. I had moderate access to the CEO. We started working with them, developed clarity around vision, mission, and values, started doing some education, started to see a real fracture in the character of the CEO,
Okay.
started to see some evidence of immoral behavior, um, ran into a circumstance where one of my colleagues went to hold him accountable, and he blasted the colleague and left a training session, actually, because
Wow.
he wasn't being willing to be held accountable. Um, I came in one day and I said to one of the employees, I said, there's a beautiful Jaguar parked in your handicap zone, and it doesn't have a sticker on it. And he goes, yeah, I know, that's the CEO. And I went, ooh, why would he do that? And he goes, well, because it's 30 below outside. It's the closest parking spot to the front door. And it's like, wow. So there was this huge moral gap,
Yeah.
um, not only just morally in general, but with the company values. So I tried and tried to phone him. He wouldn't return my calls. I talked to his EA. She passed on the message. He wouldn't see me. Talked to some of the other C-suite members. They passed on the message. He wouldn't see me. Finally phoned one of the C-suite members. And by this time, my contact had actually left the organization. He was so ticked off with this guy.
Sure.
He left the organization. And I sat down with one of the senior executives and said, look, I use these words. I said, here's what's happening. This project is bound to fail because of his behavior. We're already seeing significant trust issues in the organization. Alignment with the values will be almost impossible with him here. and I said, I need to fire you, which was really tough because they were my only client at the time. And I said,
Wow.
willing to engage, but it won't work. And what I didn't know was 2 weeks, or 2 weeks, 2 days previous to that, executive was phoned by the CEO at 3 a.m. The CEO was drunk. He started screaming and swearing at him on the phone about some financial issue. Um, and by the time I sat down with him, it was just like that was the final straw, and he kind of flipped the switch. He said to me, "Look, I'm not going to tell you what's going on. Just give me 2 or 3 weeks, and don't fire us yet, because what you're doing is good work." Anyways, he ended up going to the chairman of the board. The board did an investigation, fired the CEO. And what was really interesting is the new CEO came in, but he now had a big challenge. Previous CEO had violated trust. New CEO steps in, great man of character.
Right.
Boy, you got to do a lot of work to earn trust here. So I worked coaching him, clarity on strategy, clarity on goals, started setting up monthly town halls where the executives went out to field operations throughout, and started over communicating, if you will, like with a very intentional basis
Sure.
to sort
Sure.
of grow that trust. And 3 years later, they went from 250 million to a billion. And the
Wow.
CEO had a marble sculpture done and engraved, and he gave it to me and said, "We want to thank Integrity Consulting for helping us achieve our first $1 billion in sales."
Wow.
So it was went from a real negative to a real positive.
Have you written any books on this, Brock? I didn't see it in your bio.
Yeah, so I'm writing the book now.
Oh, good,
In fact, my
good.
publisher just phoned me the other day and says, "Where is it?" And I said, "Not even close."
Oh,
So I got pressure coming. I'm hoping to have a draft to the publisher by this summer, and they're going to review it. I would hope to get it out by the fall. But it really is one of the downsides of my business, or the things that frustrated me most, was um, is smaller companies generally could not afford what we did for the larger public companies. So the book is intended to provide any leader,
sure.
large public, private, or small organization, with a map and tools for setting up an effective values-based organization, with complete org design, org alignment, and training
Great.
and development recommendations with training maps. Um, and using sort of stories and developing process to
Good.
give to people, so anybody can use
Well, you're going to have to come back on when you're getting ready to publish,
it.
okay?
Okay, that'd be fun.
you know, and we learned early on too in our business. Again, we've been 25 years, but we knew, ethics, integrity in the business we do with assessments and coaching was critical.
Yeah.
If we don't have integrity, we don't, in my viewpoint, we don't have a business,
Hmm.
period, right?
Hmm.
But we also learned early on to be very careful who we work with.
Yeah.
We've been burned by like some external coaches and things, and it was kind of shame on us. We saw it in the data, but we thought, well, we could make it work anyway. Well,
Hmm.
it didn't, but I'm just saying. So now when we work with people, I mean, we certify a lot of internal, external coaches, but then we also partner with certain coaches on projects, right?
Hmm.
But for us, in selecting those folks, they have to align with our values.
Yep.
Does that, I mean, that's the screening mechanism, as well as then they have to obviously have the professional credentials and
Yep.
approach that we're looking for. But
Hmm.
I mean, in our business, I mean, if you don't have that, I just think it's like probably the most important thing we deliver.
My Jeannie and I, my wife and I, sat down when we started this business and said a couple of things, and one of them was we didn't want to have our fingerprints on a project that we felt was bound to fail.
That's
So, for example, going to an organization where the CEO lacks any sort of humility, any sort of courage, is a bully, um, and there may be coaches that can work with that, and that's fine. Um, but it's like the probability of success here is low if people are just ticking off the box. Hey, I provided
right.
training, the box is ticked off. Now get back to work and make money. So if that was the scenario, we thought the probability of success is really low. We don't want to be part of it. And you need to be willing to walk away,
Absolutely.
walk away from that. And it bodes well for your industry when you do. I can tell you, Nance, for 30 years, we've held that to be
That's,
true.
yeah,
And for 30 years of business, 100% of our revenue has come from referral. We have
that's
never done
that's
a cold call
fabulous.
with a client.
But I really like the idea of how you vet your prospective clients. You just don't take them. You work it you work it harder than most. And so I have to applaud you. I think that honestly, I work with all kinds of coaches internationally and everything. And I think what you're doing, and I'm not blowing smoke, takes a lot of courage.
Mm,
Okay.
thank you.
But I also think finding those right leaders that are ready for the work that you do, is amazing. So I'm really looking forward to your book. And I think if you've anybody out there that has read The Advantage, you've got to read this upcoming book from Brock, or if
Mm,
you really want to help your clients understand not just the words on the wall, and that's
mhm.
too often what we do with core values, but how do you apply it in the day-to-day decision making and the life of your organization. Was
Yeah,
really interesting too that CEO you mentioned that parked in the handicap spot.
yeah,
I mean, seriously, you talk about arrogance, or the egotist, what we call profile, but look what message he's sending to all the employees. I'm like, that's just so glad they got rid of him. And look what that story in and of itself, can be the basis, a big, center point of your book, I think.
mhm.
Because it's hard, for these C suites sometimes to make those decisions, or the boards to realize this person has to go. Does that
Yeah,
make sense? Too
yeah,
often we see kind of misfits in terms of values in those C suites, and that's
mhm.
that's tough,
Yeah,
you know. And most consultants, coaches, I'm sorry, I hate to categorize, I don't think are as firm as you are on this is not going to work. Like I feel like they often work with them and try to make inroads, and
well,
in good faith. I'm not saying they don't have good faith, but I love
yeah,
the boldness is what I'm saying. And I think that's to be applauded, because it is hard. You're trying to make inroads, but then that person keeps falling back because that's who they are. they,
yeah,
they are that abrasive bully ego person, right?
yeah. And I think coaches enter that relationship with great intent.
Oh,
And I know
absolutely.
one coach, and I have a huge amount of respect for him. He functionally specializes in that environment, and he's had great success in it.
Yeah.
Um, I, I don't specialize in it, and I don't know that my character would allow me to succeed or permit me to succeed in that
Right.
environment. So, but he does, and he works very successfully in that
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I do find it now. It took me years, but I do welcome opportunities actually to work with those egotists and
environment.
abrasive leaders, because I feel like I can really hold a mirror and help them understand the
Yeah,
impact of what they're doing, and that
yeah,
it's just not okay. Now, that doesn't mean I have long term success with those clients, but I feel like unless they get that upfront, hey, this is you and this is what you're doing, and it's
mhm,
not okay
mhm,
in any world, you know. But
yeah,
it took me a long time to be able to do that, but now I kind of have no problem with those types of leaders in terms of, you know, coaching, debriefing, working with them, but it took a long time. So
yeah.
anyway, that's kind of interesting. So and recently we had the pleasure of having Brock go through our certification with our
Mhm,
assessment. So I got to know him even better. So that was really fun. And we had a great small group of coaches going through when Brock went through, which was very enjoyable. But I just wanted to ask you, you know, and you can be honest with me. It's okay.
mhm.
We're talking integrity. How was that process for you? Was it helpful? And going forward, do you see the assessments helping you in your practice? Is that
Sure. Well, short answer, very helpful. And so historically, the assessments I've used, Nancy, have been behavioral based.
okay?
And yours was the very first assessment where I've certified in, which is psychological based upon those, original
Right.
five psychological components. So I've always known what the behavior was,
Right. You did.
whether it be 360 interview or LPI by Kuzos and Posner, whatever. Um, but I never knew why.
Yes.
And
Yes.
with your assessment, I'm able to determine sort of the why, and
Right.
it allows me to sort of hone in on, what we can do to help the client succeed in their role and in the environment, and in some cases, examine the role,
Yes.
you know, that they're in. So it really gives me the why, and I think a starting point for any leader who's learning to lead is they've got to start with leading self. And
Absolutely.
and especially when you look at the character and the risk assessments in the CDR, that understanding that and looking at how do I adapt my behavior to be more effective in terms of what I want, that learning to influence self is so critical, and it's a wonderful, wonderful tool for
Oh,
helping
good, good.
helping that to
Yeah.
happen.
Well, thank you. And I didn't pay him to say that. So no, no, I think it's helpful too. Like, and obviously in my case, and I'm biased, I guess I'm in the business, but I just won't coach without it because it just helps me, like you say. I mean, I can get their stories, I can get the 360, I can get that external data on what's
Mhm.
going on. But unless I know the why and can help, and I'm a little impatient, so I love to have it up front.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's my approach. But anyway, we're glad you're on board and part of our network, and and I think it will even help your work with integrity even more because you know where people are coming from. There's no wiggle room, right?
Mhm.
In terms of why are they doing this? Is this a repeat sort of thing we
Mhm.
can expect from this person? So,
Mhm.
well, good, good. Now, so I want to switch gears totally, just so people can get to know you. What do you do for fun, Brock? What do you do for fun up there?
Oh,
And how cold is it up there right now?
well, actually, it's been a warm week, but we're getting about a foot of snow right now. But it's not that cold. It's starting to become spring, so
I'm
that
in
was
the
nice.
Houston area, so it's warm. Okay, and you're
Yeah.
north of Calgary. There you go.
So what do I do for fun? Well, so one of my hobbies is I keep koi, and
Okay,
they're
great.
they're in my garage right now because it's winter. But
Because
in
it's
the summer,
cold.
I have a large pond outside that I keep my koi in. And then my wife and I really enjoy kayaking.
Oh, nice.
So we did a trip not last year, the year before, up to the Bowen Lakes in northern British Columbia, an 8-day kayak trip, and this allows us to spend time together and get some exercise at the same time.
Great, great. Now, so what does your wife do for the business? She's still in your business, right? So you said she's kind of just so we can. It's Jeannie, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what is Jeannie?
So
So we want to give a call out to Jeannie too.
yeah, always. Thank you. So historically, Jeannie has done all of our admin and books, and she has also
Okay,
run all of our online assessments.
great.
That's been her forte. She actually certified in DISC and Leadership Challenge.
Okay,
Uh, she doesn't deliver that, but it becomes an understanding of the assessment tools that are used.
sure.
But she ran all of our online business for us and administers our online course, which is called Values Based Decision Making. She does all the administration on that right now. But with me sort of pivoting away from the consulting side and
Right.
focusing now purely on coaching, she gets a lot more free time with our grandkids. So she does
Oh,
a lot of that
excellent.
too.
And how
Yeah,
many
yeah.
grandkids do you have again?
We've got four. We got two in
4.
town, and we got two on the other side of the country in Nova Scotia. Yeah,
Okay, great, great.
yeah,
Yeah, you need to spend time with the grandkids. I can
yeah,
attest to that. I've got
yeah.
quite a few myself. So
Yeah.
anyway, okay. And so one other personal insight or human insight, if you will. Tell us something about you that people just wouldn't guess, or it'd be a surprise for us to hear.
Okay. Um, well, I know my kids mock me for a couple of reasons. One is I cry a lot at sad movies.
Oh, okay, that's awesome.
Brian's song,
Yeah,
what's the other one? Armageddon. I
right.
always weep at those movies. And one of my favorite movies is Legally Blonde, which my kids love to mock me about
Okay,
as well. That
good. Oh,
tends to
that's great.
surprise people when I say that.
That's great. No, that's wonderful. Um, so I guess my last question: what parts of your work give you the most satisfaction?
Well, good question. So a couple things. One is watching an executive blossom when they ask for feedback,
Yes,
and especially when they ask for feed forward, and then watch how they respond to it, and then watch how their team responds to them doing that.
good.
Um, but the other thing is just seeing a leadership team come together around values, build great strategy, celebrate wins with their team, celebrate failures by saying, what did we do? How do we get better? Using it as learning opportunity
Good.
and holding one another accountable to values. It's wonderful to see an executive be challenged in front
Yeah,
of a group and say, thank you for that challenge. And here's why my decision is aligned with our values, or you're right, it's not aligned. I got
great.
to change that decision. And we've seen both. And it's wonderful to watch when that
Yeah,
happens.
no, that is fabulous. So,
Yeah.
like I said, I couldn't have been more thrilled with your line of work only because I see such a void. I hate to say it,
Mm.
or lack of applied value. So,
Mhm.
you've got to get the book done. Do you have a title to share with us yet, or not yet? Is that still
Can't share it yet. I'll have to get
okay? That's
feedback.
fine.
I've got some ideas, but it'll
I
have the
understand
word
that.
success in it.
Do you know too? I've even trademarked the title of my next book. So there you go. I
Oh,
get
there you go. I better do that. Good tip.
so, but anyway, because I was making up a word, that's why, it's a new
Mhm.
word. So anyway, that's my eccentric side, right? Anyway,
Absolutely.
um, no, this has been great. Anything else you'd like to add? I mean, this has been a delight. I look forward to re-interviewing you once your book is either close to release. How's that? Then you'll have the name. But anything
Yeah.
else you'd like to add for those?
No, it's I guess if I were to advise anybody starting going down the values based journey, don't make the assumption when you create values that people will understand them the same way you do. You need to
Right.
educate people on them, not just on the values themselves, but how to use them to make tough choices. And then you need to put them in a testing environment where they can do that and understand that when we make decisions by values, it will feel great sometimes, but there will be times it'll be through blood, sweat, and tears
Oh
when
yeah.
you are end up paying more than you want to pay to make the right choice. Yeah,
Exactly. And the
yeah,
examples you gave, but I think in the end, it's a much better place to be. I
yeah,
mean, you can sleep at night, you feel good about it. Like I've always said it, if we have to shut the door tomorrow, to me, that's how important living by, you know, our ethics and integrity in the work
yeah,
that we do. It's just
yeah.
so important. So again, I want to thank you. I've had such a good time talking with you. I could go on, but again, we usually try to talk for about 40 minutes or so. And
Yeah, yeah.
and last and most important, where can people reach out and get in touch with you? What,
Sure.
yeah.
So they can find Integrity Consulting Services Limited on LinkedIn or Brock Brown on LinkedIn.
Okay, good.
My email is brock@ethics1.ca and our website is integrityconsulting.ca.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much, Brock. I've really enjoyed talking with you today.
Nancy, my pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks.